welcome to Immediate Immersion Live. Today we're going to be talking about story asking and how we ask our stories to engage our students. My name is Scott. You're watching Immediate Immersion Live, and I'll be right back with you. And we're back. Hello, everybody, again. Welcome. If you'd like to share this with friends and family that you know who are interested in comprehensible-based teaching, we ask that you please share it and like our videos so that we can get out to more people. So today we're going to be talking about story asking. And what exactly is story asking? Let's start with that question. Well, first of all, story asking is kind of like storytelling, but the difference is that we are using our students to get the story. So we are asking leading questions to be able to get our students to interact with us in the target language so that we can come up with a story together. We co-collaborate on a story. Now, why is this important? It's much more important to interact and create a co-created story with students, because this way they're engaged, they're invested in the story. Storytelling is more of a passive type of activity, and students are just listening to the story unfold, and you're hoping that they're understanding. When they are co-creating a story with you, that makes for a much more engaging process. It's not just teacher presenting to student, but it is an interactive activity, and students are using what they know, they're demonstrating their comprehension skills, and they're providing their own ideas, which makes them more invested in the story that we are creating together. So that's really important, and that's the difference between storytelling and story asking. Now, the way that I like to start my stories, it's at least a 2 to 3 day process for me for stories. And the first day is always about the character. I need to co-create a strong character with my students. And so in order to do that, we start with figuring out what our character is. Now, I've done a previous episode on creating a class mascot. That could be your character, or you could start fresh. And so for the purposes here, I'm going to talk about starting fresh with a character. So that first day, my only goal is to build a strong character with my students so that we can put them into action on days 2, 3, and any subsequent days. So we need to first figure out, what is our character going to be? Is it going to be a person? Is it going to be an animal? Is it going to be a thing? Now, my favorite thing for a character to be is a thing, an inanimate object. I like these because they don't lend themselves to stereotypes. Animals and people tend to lend themselves to stereotypes, and I want to break away from all of these stereotypes. So my goal often is to try to get them to choose pardon me, I'm still recovering from my respiratory infection. But I want them to create an inanimate object usually so that we can start from scratch with no preconceived notions whatsoever. But let your students choose. If you're okay with animals and people, that's great. If you want to do inanimate objects, that's great too. Whatever works best for you. But that's my reasoning, and I tend to push my kids towards those inanimate objects. So we need to establish this character. And again, it's not coming from me. I know that I need a character, and I know the types of things that kind of questions I need to ask to be able to bring this character out, but the answers all come from my students. When you tell your students this is kind of like a lecture, it becomes teacher-centric, and that's not our goal. We want it to be student-centric. So I'm the conductor trying to get the music out of my students. And so all the ideas are coming from my students. I'm just asking the right questions to get those ideas out on the table. So the first thing, after we figure out what is going to be our character, then we can talk about size, we can talk about color, we can talk about age, where they live, their family, things that they like to do, their favorite things. Remember, we're all trying to develop a three-dimensional character. And again, that first day, that's all I'm working on, is creating this character. Who are they? What are they? Who are their friends? Who are their family? What do they things they like to do? You can also have a student draw this character if you'd like. That's an extra step, not required to create a story, but that might give a good visual for some of your other students to create what this character looks like, their environment, all of that. And so I spend the first day just developing this character. I don't go into the plot at all on this day. Why? For a couple of reasons. First, I want to be able to stretch the story asking experience. This is the heart of comprehension-based instruction. This is how you get kids to be able to speak in the language. So I need to stretch this out as long as possible. And in years past, we've tried all kinds of tricks to be able to spread the story asking part out over multiple days. We've tried leading them onto cliffhangers or making like little chapters. And none of that really has worked to really keep the interest. Yes, if you do a cliffhanger, they're really excited and want to stay after so you can finish it. But it's rare that that cliffhanger will keep them going until the next day. So when I build a character and do that on the day and there's nothing else, there's no expectation. There's nothing I have to bring back or increase the level of interest. It's a natural stopping point. We have a character, we built this character, we know who this character is, and then the next day we can put them into a story. We can put them into action. And so it's a natural breaking point, and that natural breaking point really works well to stretch it out. So you at least have 2 days. But my goal is always to try to get more than that. So I might use another technique like a cliffhanger to stretch it out to 3 days. But I know I can at least get 2 days out of it. Now, once I have my character built with all of my students' input, and we have this full-fledged character, now the period is going to end, and we're going to come in on the next day, and now we're going to build our script. We're going to have a preconceived minor script. I call it a skeleton script to get the character back into play. And so what I like to do is first spend the first few minutes reviewing the character and what the character is, so we get that back in our minds and fresh. And then I use this 4-point script that I use. So we have character, and I'm going to put this up on the screen for us in just a moment here. Character is the first thing. Then we're going to have a problem. And then we're going to have a failure. And then we're going to have success. So let me put this up on the screen so everybody can see that. So this is my little script. It's my 4-step script. And we spent the first day on the first part of the script, the character building. But now we need to give them a problem. That's the the conflict. That's the heart of the plot. So what I do is I ask a question. Class, what is the problem of the character? Now, one of the tricks I like to use to get this information out of kids in a creative way is at the end of the first day when we're building a character, we figure out what emotion drives this character. And then as an exit ticket, I will ask students, why does this character have this emotion? And 2, what is the deepest, darkest secret of this character? So the kids will answer this on an exit ticket. I usually do it on a Google form, so I have everything nice and neat in a spreadsheet. And then as their warm-up, when they come in the next day, they're going to vote. So I'm going to compile the answers I got, clean them up, toss out some that are inappropriate, simplify some of them, and then give them another Google form where they can vote on the 2 things. Why the character feels the way that they do, and what their deepest, darkest secret is. I don't share with the students the results, but I know what the results are, and I can ask leading questions to get us to those results. So lots of times my problem will come either from the secret or why the character has that deep, dark emotion. It doesn't mean that that's the only way I can get a problem, but lots of times my best problems, my best conflicts come from one of those 2 questions that I asked as an exit ticket at the end of the first day. If I don't use one of those, then I'm just asking, what is the problem? And I'm listening for answers from my students. And kids who aren't very vocal, then I will ask them directly. So I let kids shout out a few answers. I get 2 or 3 that way. And then I'm going to ask an additional 2 or 3 students to provide their answers. And then we're going to vote. And if I do it this way without using the Google Doc, then we're going to vote openly just by raising their hands. And then whatever we vote is going to be the answer. If we use the Google Doc way, I already know what the vote was, the results. And so I'm still going to ask the question. Kids are going to shout out their answers. And then I'm going to say, oh, class, es obvio. It's obvious. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever the voting result was from the Google Doc. And so that's how I get my problem. And I work with this problem. Now, once I've established the problem with my students, I now need to talk to them about it. So we're going to be expanding about it, developing, talking about it in the target language, asking more questions about it, getting more details about the problem to work it out. Remember the story, the whole point of this is to get kids to hear enough language to be comfortable enough to be able to speak their own language. And so this can't be a rush job. It's not to how fast we can get to the ending of our story. What we need is to take our time, to use lots of repetition, to make excuse me, to make sure all of our students are understanding as we go along. So I'm going to spend easily 10, 15 minutes on just working with the problem, reviewing it, getting details, getting more specific, talking with my kids about all of these details. And then once I've gotten that part, we need to have them try to solve the problem, but fail. So that's where that third part of my script comes in, the failure. So they're going to try to solve it. Whatever the problem is, try to have them solve it and solicit those. Where do they go? What do they do to try to solve the problem? But know in the back of your mind that you can't pick something that is going to actually solve the problem. Because if you do, then your story ends. And we don't want that to happen. And you can have multiple failures in a story if you want to really stretch it out. You can have them try multiple things and fail at them over and over again before you finally give them some success. But again, this little part about the failure, I'm spending at least 10 to 15 minutes on this particular part of the story because I want to work the language. I want to play with the language a while. I want the kids to be able to hear it in multiple ways, in multiple sentences, in long sentences, in short sentences, in medium sentences, so that the kids can hear how the language works in all of its varieties. Once we figured out this failure and we go, oh, they failed at this and they didn't get what they wanted, you can make another failure, or you can go ahead and have them try something else and this time be successful. Now, successful does not always mean that they get what they want and they're happy. It's just a resolution to the story. There's an ending that now says that the story is now complete. And again, I'm asking leading questions to get this out from my students. Now, here's an example of a story that years ago during one of my workshops, the audience wanted me to come up with a story off the top of my head. So one that I had not pre-planned or anything like that. And I don't generally pre-plan stories. I just know I have to work with this script: character, problem, failure, success. So here's what I did. We came up with a story. They wanted me to use the subjunctive. So the thing that we were working on was Mom wanted the boy to do his homework. So in Spanish and in French, it causes the subjunctive in here. Mom wanted that the boy do his homework. So we started with the story. We started with the character about the boy and how he was lazy and he never wanted to do his homework. He wanted to play video games. He wanted to watch TV. He wanted to hang out with his friends. All those sorts of things. So I then asked my story. So the problem was he didn't want to do his homework, but his mom wanted him to be able to do his homework. And so one of the suggestions was he went to the library. Well, oh my gosh, I got stuck on this one because that's where people a lot of times do homework. So being able to, that could have ended my story right there. So I had to figure out a way to get myself out of that hole. So one of the keys, whenever I can't think of an answer right away or how to get myself out of a hole I dug myself into, I'll always go back and review what we already have. So I'm reviewing all the information with my students while my brain is thinking, how am I going to get myself out of the situation? So that's what I did. I went back to the beginning of the story. I repeated the story. There was a boy. He didn't want to do his homework, all that stuff, and got him back to the library. And then I had my little answer. By the time I got him back to the library, I had why it was going to be a failure. It was too quiet in the library, and he fell asleep and didn't get his homework done. So that was my failure. So then I had to ask a question, what else is he going to do next? Well, someone suggested that Mom called a celebrity. So Mom called Angelina Jolie, and Angelina Jolie was going to be his tutor for his homework. Well, how we resolved this was he loved Angelina Jolie, and because Angelina Jolie wanted that he do his homework, and he loved her so much that he did anything she asked. So he got his homework done, Angelina Jolie was happy, and so was his mother. But this was all from me just asking in a live workshop without any pre-planning at all. Again, using this script: character, problem, failure, success. Now, in order to make it more engaging, You can't just ask the story without anything else going on. I like to add in actors. And I'll have my main actor be my main character, and I want to include a lot of other students playing other parts. But my rule is I want kids who are going to act the part enough to keep interest, but not enough to cause problems or to detract from what was going on. And two, my actors are only on the stage when they're doing their scene, and then they go sit back down. The exception is my main character. They're standing up when it's time to act their part. Then they're going to sit down in my main chair at the front of the stage when they're not acting their part or when I'm discussing and reviewing with the class. But any subsequent characters, they're going to come up, they're going to do their part, and they're going to go and sit down. Too many kids up at the front of the room can cause a lot of distraction. They can goof off when you are asking questions to the rest of the class or developing the story and they're not actively acting. When you are having them actively act, you want to be the director, so you have them do exactly what you want them to do. Not before, not after, but as you're saying it. They're not allowed to improvise, so that they're helping the comprehension and engagement level of the students, and they need to be able to act and do exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Then, after their scene is over, before I have them sit back down in their seats, I'll have them sit there in the front, and I'm going to interview them. And I'm going to interview them, and they're going to play their character, and I'm going to play an interviewer so that we can hear first, second, and third person use of these verbs. So I'm asking them questions so that the audience, the students, can hear how the verbs are being used so they can slowly acquire how to conjugate the verbs without doing actual conjugation. So I might ask, so we have the main character and his name was Bob. So, what's your name? He needs to answer or she needs to answer in a complete sentence. So if they're not able to do that, then either give them the sentence and they repeat after you. You say the sentence for them in a funny voice, or you can write it on the board and have them repeat it. This is not forced production because you, aren't expecting them to come up with the sentence. You are giving them the sentence. We just want them to say it in a complete sentence so the kids in the audience can hear how the grammar works, how we build sentences. So he's going to say, yes, my name is Bob. And then I'm going to talk to the third person. Class, did you hear? His name was Bob. Bob, how old are you? I am 14 years old. Bob, am I 14 years old? Bob says, no, you are not 14 years old. I said, that's right, Bob. You are 14 years old. Class, did you hear that? Bob was 14 years old. Now, any verb I'm going to write on the board, not the whole sentence, just the verb in the form that I'm using it, in the order that I'm using it. So I'm not going to be writing it in conjugation order. First, second, third, then first, second, third, plural. No. I'm asking the question in you form. What is your name? So I'm going to write that in the you form first. And then immediately under that, I'm going to write the I form because they need that to be able to answer it. And then I'm going to write the third person in the past form when I talk to my audience. Again, I'm not going to write it before I use it, but when I'm using it or right after I use it, I will write on the board so they can see how it's written, how it's formed, what it looks like. And every subsequent time that I'm using it, I'm pointing at that verb. This is how kids get comfortable with verb conjugations in a natural way. Excuse me. When I'm done interviewing the student and their scene is over, they're going to go sit back down and we're going to go to the next phase of the story. And this is how I do it all of the time. So we do our character. I'll bring my character up. We'll interview the character. Set him back down. Bring my character back up for the problem. We discover the problem. I ask them questions in the class about developing the problem. The actor acts it out. They sit down. I interview them. Off the stage they go. Each segment of the story, this is what we do. Sometimes because this can take a long time, it lasts 2, 3, maybe even 4 days for us to fill out the story. And if it's a really engaging story because you gotten all the answers from your students and you didn't come up with the answers, so it's their story, not your story, it will last even longer because kids are engaged in the story. They're invested in the story. It's their story. I use the same script. I need a character, we need a problem, we need a failure, we need a success. I'm using the same vocabulary that I want to work with. Usually the Super 7 or the Sweet 16 verbs. So I'm going to get 5 or 6 different stories. Each class is going to have their own story, even though we started with the same ingredients, like say. So that's how I work with building my characters, doing my scripts, having my actors, and then teaching verbs so that they can acquire the verbs. That's in that interview process. This way they hear it. And I want to make sure I repeat the different forms of the verbs as many times as naturally possible. As I say them, I write them on the board in the order that I use them. And then every subsequent use of them, I will point to them so the kids can see how they're spelled. Especially in languages that aren't phonetic like French, where almost all the verb forms sound the same. Je parle, tu parles, il parle. They all sound the same, but they're spelled differently. So they need to be able to see and match the sounds with the letters. So that's the basics of story asking. Anybody have any questions before we go on to other ways to start a story? I'll just give a moment and see if we get any questions. Just feel free to drop them right into the chat box. Okay, don't see anything coming through, so I will just continue. If something pops up, I'll address it as it comes. So feel free just to type it right in the chat box as... Oh, we get it in. Paul says, I came in. Awesome. Welcome, Paul. Pika asks a good question. Student idea suggestions are coming in English? Sometimes, yes. Here's my rule for use of language in my classroom. The only language that I can control is my own. So I want to use as much of the target language as possible, and I want to encourage my students also to use as much of the target language as possible. But sometimes their ideas exceeds their ability. So I will let them give me ideas in English or whatever the common language is, and then I will put them in the target language for them. If I make a rule that they can only use the target language, then it stifles ideas and I don't get very much. that way. So I will let them use in English, but once we've established how to say it in the target language, then forevermore it must be in the target language. Great question, Pika. Paul says, I came in as you were discussing how to figure out the problem, the questions that you use, but I missed them. Basically what I was saying, Paul, was to come up with, Pika says, I'll come right back to you, Paul, 1 second here. Pika says, agreed, just checking. Yes. Awesome. So there's a couple ways that I established the problem in the beginning. If at the end of my character building day, the first day, sometimes we'll give a character an emotion. And then as an exit ticket, I'll have kids answer the questions. Why does this character have this emotion? And what's their deepest, darkest secret? And the answers from that I can use as a basis for a problem if I can see one from what they've given me. If not, I'm just going to ask a question. What's the problem? And let kids shout out answers to me. Whenever I allow kids to shout out answers to me, I always want to end by asking individual students their ideas, because there's, some kids are shy and aren't going to join in the fray, or their voices can't be heard because they're softer speakers. So then I'll ask for 3 additional. So I got some group ideas, and now I've got 3 additional ideas. So that way I can show kids I want both individual and I want group answers. Great questions. And just so everybody knows, this is recorded. So if you're watching on the replay, please put your questions also in the chat, in the comments, and I will come back and answer them for you. And you are welcome, Paul. And if you missed any part of this, you're always welcome to come back and re-watch it. It is on YouTube for you to be able to watch. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's talk about other ways to start stories. I don't just do it with the character and then the script. Sometimes I'll start with a picture talk. I like to do picture talks because I can bring in culture. I can use like a piece of art or sculpture or a backdrop of a city, and we can talk about that. Or I can just look for a funny picture that's really hilarious that kids will enjoy, and we can have a lot to talk about. And if I want to, if I think it's going well, I can work that into a story. So for example, if it's just a funny picture, like I have a picture that I use a lot. It's a picture of an orangutan, and he's got multiple apples all shoved in his mouth at the same time. So we start with just describing this picture. What's in the picture? Yes, it's a orangutan. Is this a monkey or is it an ape? It's an ape. It's not a monkey. We talk about that. What color is it? Does he have big eyes or small eyes? Does he have a big mouth or a small mouth? All these basic things. And then the problem part comes in. What's he got into his mouth? He's got apples. How many apples does he got? We count them all in there. Now here comes the problem. Why does he have all these apples in his mouth? So then we get different answers from this picture, and I'm building a story. So this is a real life one that I've done, and I got these 2 different answers in the same class, and I could have gone either way with the story. The first was, he stole all these apples so he can eat them all for himself. And the other version, which was complete opposite, was he got all these apples for his family and he's climbing the tree to share it with his family. So I had 2 different stories that we could have gone with that information. We ended up going with he stole all the apples because that's what my kids voted for. They thought that was a better version of a story, and I could work with that. Where did he steal these apples from? Why did he steal these apples? What was he going to do with the apples once he stole them? We determined he wasn't going to eat them. So he was going to actually throw the apples at the other orangutans in the enclosure. So that was the story that we got from this particular picture talk. It doesn't follow the same kind of structure as character, problem, failure, success, but it does have a story, a problem, and a conclusion. There's an orangutan. He stole these apples. He took these apples and he threw them at other orangutans in the enclosure. Or you could have him, he could throw at the humans who are looking at him in the enclosure. So there's all these different possibilities, and we got this idea from a picture. Or let's say we use like a backdrop. So we use Mexico City. We have a market in Mexico City as a backdrop. So we can use this. We can start describing the picture. What is in the picture? What is being sold at this market? Is it a food market or is it a product market? Is it souvenirs for tourists or is it for people who live in Mexico City? Is there a lot of people in the picture or is there a few people in the picture? Okay. Then we don't have a character yet because it's just a backdrop. We can put a character in, maybe using our class mascot character that we built at the beginning of the year. We might use that character, put him in this scene, and see what happens. Does he buy something from the market? Does he pay face value or does he haggle? All of these types of things can go on, and we can talk about what goes on. Again, using a culturally relevant picture. We can also use a piece of art. And after describing the art, we can either have someone go to a museum and observe this piece of art, or we can talk about the painter or the creator of this art as if they're the character. What were they thinking when they painted this? Or when they created this sculpture? Or they took this photograph? Lots of different ways where you can use picture talk as a way to launch your stories instead of a more traditional way of asking a story starting with a character and building a script from there. And another great way, clicking the wrong button here. Another great way to come up with a story is a movie talk. So a movie talk is the least amount of work for coming up with a story because you're using a video as your basis and the video's already there and you know the plot of the story. Where you can extend it is, instead of just showing the video and talking about the video, you take screenshots of the main scenes and you can talk about these screenshots for days before you actually get to the showing of the video at the end of all of these screenshots. So it's kind of like mini picture talks. So I might take a minute-long video and I might have like 30 screenshots from that. And so I'm talking about each of those screenshots as individuals, that each one tells a little bit more of the story. We work with the vocabulary, the sentences from each screenshot before we move on to the next one. And then towards the end, we'll have a movie that will show the video so the kids can see it in its entirety. This is kind of like a stepping stone to asking stories because you don't have to create your own story. It's already there for you. You're just slowly, what's the word I want to say? Slowly exposing it to your students bit by bit by bit. And then you're asking the story. You already know what happens, so you're asking leading questions. Kids are going to be guessing, and then when they guess correctly, that's what you're going to use. But you have this way, the script is already built for you. So if you're not comfortable just going out and asking a story, then starting with a movie talk will scaffold it really, really well for you. And then you could go to picture talks to slowly wean yourself off the completed script of a movie talk. You can do a picture talk as an in-between before you finally feel comfortable with doing your story asking off the cuff. So those are the ways that I do story asking in my class. They're pretty much all the same version of the same thing. It's slightly different, so the kids think we're doing something different when really I'm still story asking. I'm still working on vocabulary, grammar, verbs with my students in an oral way so they can acquire the language and hear the patterns enough that they start to become embedded in the brain. Any questions or comments about story asking before we end for tonight? While you're thinking about that, a couple of announcements. Next week, we will continue this 3-part series of Back to Basics, and we're going to be talking about reading, the reading element part, which is the 3rd part of my comprehension-based lesson plan. I always start my lesson plans with conversations, then with the story asking, and then I finalize it with a reading of a text. So that's what we'll talk about next week. What's the date? The 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I think it's the 5th of December is next Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific time, just like always. So I hope to see you again then. Also, we just announced our Black Friday specials. Everything that we have are 50% off using coupon code Black Friday. And I'm going to put this up for you just a moment here. Black Friday. So if you're looking for one of our webinars, our Webversity courses, or any of our curriculum, you can get that at mm.us/shop. There it is up on the screen. And our Comprehended 2023 conference that starts in February, we're giving a 50% off on that for Black Friday as well. So you can use the same coupon code Black Friday. And here is the link to register for that. And it gets 50% off registration at comprehended.co/register. All of the Black Friday deals are good through Wednesday, November 30th at midnight Pacific time. So it's not just good for Black Friday. You've got about a week and a half to take advantage of those. And they are 50% off using the coupon code Black Friday at checkout. Does anybody have any other questions before we go this evening? And again, if you're watching this on replay, feel free to put your questions in the comments. And I do go back and check and I'll answer them for you. Okay, then with that, we say thank you very much. Please we got here. Pika says, do you have a bank of favorite Picture Talk images? I do have a collection of them that I add to as I go. They're in a Google slide deck. If you email me at scott@immediateimmersion.com, I'll be happy to share that with you, that I use for Picture Talks. Thank you, Pika. So yes, email me at scott@immediateimmersion.com, and I'll go ahead and send that out. So please, if you enjoyed this, do you have an in-person conference in California coming up? Not as of yet do I have any in-person conferences coming up. Everything is online right now. I think I've got one coming up in Michigan. Someone asked about doing one in Michigan. We're finalizing the details on that. But if you would like me to do one in there, there is information on my website at immediateimmersion.com on how either to get me to come to your school or to do one in your area. So you can check out there. And Paul says, cool. Okay, so if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. You're welcome, Pika. And I will see all of you next week. Same time, same channel. Have a good one, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving and enjoy your time off.